Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sarah Nadulis. I'm the Program Manager of the Global Water Security and Sanitation Partnership. This event we're having today is, it marks the launch of a new partnership between the World Bank and the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. It represents a landmark initiative aimed at knowledge sharing, technical assistance, and fostering dialogue and action to address transboundary water challenges in World Bank client countries. The objective of the seminar today is to celebrate the partnership and to provide an opportunity for participants to learn more about the MDBA experience and the World Bank's role as a facilitator for bringing global knowledge and innovation to financing and shared river basins. So for the agenda today, you'll first hear opening remarks from our esteemed speakers. We'll then have a presentation from the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, and then the World Bank will present on the Transboundary Water Program. So let me introduce the opening speaker. I'm going to hand it over to Jürgen Vogel, who's the Vice President of the Planet Vertical at the World Bank.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and good day, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of those on the screen. Let me thank you all for taking the time to be with us for the next hour for this very, very important event. For me, this is quite personal. So those of you who know me for a while, I've been at the World Bank for 35 years now, and I spent a significant part of that time in Asia. Did actually my PhD 30 years ago in Samoa, in Apia, and have since then had very close connections with Canberra. Across the board, across many different topics, including water. And I can tell you right now, this is not the first time we're interacting with the Murray-Darling River Basin Authority. In fact, we have decades of friendship and joint learning and collaboration behind us. Even 30 years ago, when there was a water question, that was the place to go. It was the gold standard at the time. You were absolutely outstanding at that time. And of course, you still are. But you have also learned lessons, I believe. I remember very distinctly when everybody said, you know, this is perfect, nothing can go wrong. And the next thing you know is you had 12 years of drought or 13 at the end of the day. And everybody was like, whoops, you know, maybe we have to rethink. Maybe we have to, you know, look at our models once again. Maybe we have to renegotiate, all of which I believe you went through. I've been following it on the sidelines a little bit, but it was very tough. Very challenging, politically not easy. I will let you, of course, Andrew, speak about this. You've been to the thick of it and to share with us. The reason I mentioned this is that every country that we at the World Bank are engaging with right now around the world is having to rethink and redo what they do with their water resources, simply because of the way the weather patterns are changing. Climate is having a massive impact in every conceivable direction on the way water falls on the ground, on the way it's stored, on the way it flows, on, you know, on the way it dries up, and it evaporates, etc., etc. And then we have two new things in the last just 18 months to 2 years that we did not know before. And one of them is that what we now call green water, and all of them in the room, and I'm sure online are increasingly fully aware of what's going on, that the soil moisture that sustains the vegetation on planet Earth is shrinking, it's declining. We now know that overall in a large part of planet Earth, certainly on the terrestrial surface of the planet, we actually have lost about 15% of the water in the ground already, and that this has massive ramifications for large parts and regions and continents, including Australia, of course, for our clients particularly. So the second thing we didn't know, when we all went to school, or most of us, not you young folks, but when I went to school, we were taught what the water cycle is. And the water cycle was taught that the water comes out of the ocean, it gets sucked up into the air through transpiration or evaporation, and it forms a beautiful little white cloud, and the wind blows it against the mountain, where it then falls as rain into a river and goes back to the ocean. That was what I learned was the water cycle. So it never crossed my mind, and I'm sure many of my contemporaries and folks later, that actually what we know today is that 50% of the water that rains somewhere on the land comes from the land. It transpires or evaporates either from a surface water or from a forest that with its multi-layers. So we didn't fully understand that. Now we know that particularly rainforests with their massive leaf cover actually are a source of rainfall that nobody really fully understood. And that changes the value of forests as well. And that changes the way every single country around the world now needs to look at what it's got above ground, surface water, groundwater, green water, and where the rainfall comes from. Are you upstream of one of those atmospheric rivers or not? Or downstream of one? How do you contribute? How do you either suffer or benefit from what's going on? Changes the dynamics everywhere in a very, very significant way. So I think water basin authorities, and I will just say one more thing. I'm sorry, I'm getting completely off script here, but there is always a bit of an unease about these river basin authorities. We've just been through quite significant conversations on the Indus, as you can imagine, as the World Bank, having a not direct role to play, but an indirect role to play, and very contentious, very controversial. Nile Basin is also very challenging, not easy. Mekong has its challenges. But what most people don't know, that the world has about 310 basin authorities, many of them transboundary, many of them international, and most of them work. Most of them are constructive, positive, lead to growth, lead to jobs, lead to win-win situations. And this is across the world. Nobody talks about these because they function. And I think our role at the World Bank, together with colleagues from Murray-Darling and many others, our role is to get the best knowledge from you. And I hope I'm sure we will hear a great presentation of what the latest thinking is, how to deal with this. And, as a team, help our clients to do what they need to do. Will this be a priority for the World Bank? Let me leave no doubt. This will have to be a priority because it's our clients' priority. Everyone I talk to during the annual meetings, spring meetings, talks about water. Even countries that I've never heard talk about water. And I could go on for a long time on this. So this is very, very critical. And these partnerships with absolutely one of the top leading organizations in Australia is for us critical. With that, let me hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jürgen. Thank you, Jürgen. I'm now going to give the floor to Chris Stevens. Chris is the Senior Vice President and General Counsel at the World Bank. Chris, over to you.
Great. Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Jürgen, and good evening, all of our distinguished guests and colleagues, and good morning to our new partners in Canberra. It really is a privilege to participate in this event. Australia generally is an enormously important member and partner of the World Bank Group. And a bit of history, Australia was a founding member of the World Bank back in 1947 and was initially a borrower with the first loan from the bank in 1950. And throughout the 1950s, the bank financed several projects for Australia, including notably the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme, which I think is Australia's largest ever civil engineering project. But by the mid-1960s, Australia had graduated from IBRD borrowing and became a founding member and an exceptionally generous donor to the International Development Association. And it also contributes very generously to a lot of other bank-administered trust funds and partnerships. And of course, Australia has sent a long line of valued and distinguished executive directors to sit on the World Bank Board of Directors, where they play an active and daily role in our policy making, project reviews, and overall oversight and supervision of the World Bank. A high priority of our board, our shareholders, and the G20 is greater collaboration with development partners and the creation of partnerships like this one. Working with partners in pursuit of common goals is among the highest priorities of the World Bank Group, because partnerships bring significant value to shared objectives by expanding resources, knowledge, and expertise, and accelerating innovation, and thereby enhancing the results, and as Jürgen said, the deliverables that we can provide to our clients. So in that context, this partnership with the Murray-Darling Basin Authority that is launched by this MOU marks a significant step forward in our shared commitment to sustainable water management, knowledge exchange, and capacity building, all vital to the World Bank's mission to foster economic development and eradicate poverty. The work of the MDBA is a perfect example of how the work of agencies in managing river basins within federal systems creates important bodies of experience and cultivates knowledge and expertise that influences and shapes the development of transboundary water law around the world. MDBA's wealth and experience in cross-jurisdictional river basin management is really invaluable to the bank in our water-related work, as Jürgen described. This is going to enhance our ability to improve systems within our member countries for access to clean water for drinking, sanitation, agriculture, and industry, and to support human health and economic growth while promoting environmental sustainability and protecting biodiversity. So we're truly fortunate to be building closer ties with the Murray-Darling Basin Authority to collaborate in pursuit of these vitally important and shared objectives, ultimately to achieve better outcomes around the world. And so with that, I thank everyone for attending and wish us both all the best in our joint success going forward. Thanks again. The end.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for highlighting and reminding us of this strong partnership that we've had and the history we have with Australia. We're now going to go over to Canberra, where we have with us Matt Dadswell. He's the head of division for the Water Policy Department of Climate Change, Energy and Environment and Water from the Government of Australia. Over to you.
All right, thank you, and hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the Australian government. I'm not actually joining you from Canberra. I'm joining you from a place in far southeastern Australia, and it's the traditional lands of the Gunai people. And I'd like to recognise and acknowledge the important historical role of Indigenous people across the globe as the traditional custodians of water and country. And I think they're very important players when it comes to looking at a number of transboundary issues, particularly as it relates in Australia. Look, it's a great pleasure to be joining you today to mark the launch of an important new partnership between the Authority and the World Bank. As climate change accelerates, populations grow and water demand increases, we are, like everyone, seeing heightened pressures on shared water resources and how we manage transboundary issues in regions across the world. For us in Australia, the pressures underscore the importance of cooperation, robust governance, and the ability to navigate competing interests with and between jurisdictions. In this context, the role of institutions, governance frameworks like the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, and shared visions become essential. Australians understand firsthand the significant impacts climate change is having on water availability. Australia is the driest inhabited continent on our planet, and our national water story is one of needing to adapt to an increasingly variable and unpredictable climate that sees, floods, significant droughts, a regular cycle, and a regular feature of the Australian landscape. We also have a long history because of that of quite difficult water reforms. These have been driven by necessity and informed by our changing values. Australia's experience in cross-jurisdictional water governance, particularly through the Murray-Darling Basin, offers lessons on what to do and, equally important, probably what not to do. And these things we can also learn from. While our challenges have unfolded within a single island nation, the complexity is similar to that faced by many transboundary basins. For those who aren't aware, Australia comprises a federation of 6 states and 2 territory governments who each have the responsibility for managing water in their jurisdictions. So it's like a collection of mini countries that we have to deal with here in Australia. And the national government, which I work with, provides the overall coordination guidance to ensure water use remains sustainable and benefits all Australians and the environment, not just one single jurisdiction and their users. So at the heart of effective governance is strong collaboration between different governments and communities. And the Murray-Darling Basin spans 4 of those states and 1 of those territories, each with their own government priorities and water users. The water system supports diverse and often competing demands, from agriculture to industry to First Nations and community water interests. And in response, and Jürgen, you've already talked about the millennium drought that we call it, the big drought that we had in from about 2000 to 2009. That really, was a wake-up call in terms of sustainable water use in the Murray-Darling Basin. And so the National Commonwealth Government stepped in and undertook a really significant, ambitious water reform to bring back sustainable water use in the basin, and importantly, from a government's perspective, establishment of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority as an independent basin-wide body that could work across governments and stakeholders. And as you'll hear from Andrew, its experience in coordinating and enforcing water sharing arrangements across boundaries will offer insights that are highly relevant to international partners, which is why today's launch of the partnership between the Authority and the World Bank is significant. This partnership, I think, is about more than an exchange of knowledge. It's about fostering long-term collaboration and creating a platform for joint learning and innovation. Just recently at the World Water Week conference in Stockholm, the World Bank kindly participated in Australia's first ever high-level panel on Indigenous water leadership. thank you for that. An event which marked an important milestone for inclusive and diverse global water dialogue. This recent event and Australia's ongoing international work with countries such as India and Indonesia through our water MOUs with those countries demonstrates Australia's commitment to sharing our experience and capabilities in water governance with our international partners who are facing transboundary issues. So in closing, I'd like to congratulate both the Authority and the World Bank for this timely and visionary collaboration. As water challenges become increasingly complex and transboundary in nature, partnerships like this are essential to achieving sustainable and equitable water outcomes for all. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you all this morning, and I look forward to the important conversations and connections this partnership will generate. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Matt. We're now going to turn it over to Andrew McConville. He's the Chief Executive of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. We're going to turn it over to Andrew for some opening remarks, and then Andrew's going to share with us some of the experience from the MDBA. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everyone. And can I pay a special tribute to Saraj for your leadership in helping to bring this to fruition, and of course Jürgen and Chris for your remarks as well. Like Matt, I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous communities around the world that play such an important part in connecting with their lands and waterways. And normally I would have put a tie on for a presentation like this, but I'm actually down right at the bottom of the Murray-Darling Basin system this morning on the Coorong Lakes, and I'm spending some time out here with communities, with Indigenous communities, with irrigators, understanding some of their issues and challenges, because as Matt said, the basin is a very large place, and there are different communities from different parts of the basin who have different needs, in addition to the states that look to ensure that our scarce water resources are well managed. I'm joined this morning also by my colleague Scott Ashby. Scott's going to take carriage of this agreement. Scott's our head of basin science and knowledge, and like me, is really excited about the opportunities to partner with the World Bank. It's kind of a nice closing circle moment, if you like, for me in partnering with the World Bank. I used to work for a company called Syngenta, which I'm sure some of you might know. It's a global agrochemical and seed company. And we had an office in Washington, D.C., where I used to spend a lot of time. And looking out my window in Washington, D.C., I saw the World Bank. And so I often used to think about, wouldn't it be nice to do something with the World Bank? So here I am some years later doing exactly that. So it's a great privilege to do so. As Jürgen said, the importance of transboundary water management is really incredible, and water worldwide, as Jürgen mentioned, is under incredible pressure with climate change, population growth, pollution, and the increasing competition for water resources. And that's straining management systems and operation systems across every continent. And so organisations like the World Bank, and through hopefully our contribution, the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, can really play an important role in shaping those policies and those operations and investments in order to use what is a very scarce and increasingly scarce resource. And certainly we're very, very proud to be able to partner with the World Bank in order to provide some level of leadership. It's very important for us at the Murray-Darling Basin Authority to be able to do this, to stretch and grow ourselves as well. I think often we can get, as we would say here in Australia, down in the weeds with the work of the day and forget that what we are doing in many cases is world leading. At times it feels like something quite different to that, as it's a struggle to get states and the Commonwealth and the authority and everything that goes together lined up to achieve good outcomes. But when I really think about it, those challenges are at the margins. And one of the things that I find, no matter where I go in the 1 million square kilometres of the basin, is that everyone here in Australia, from your largest irrigators to your environmental groups, your Indigenous people, communities, towns, everyone that depends on the basin, no one disagrees that we here in Australia need a basin plan and a plan for sharing the waters of the basin. And so if in some way we can take that knowledge and that experience and provide that to the World Bank and the countries on whom that depend upon the World Bank, then that is a good thing for everyone. And so we certainly look forward to being a really active player with the World Bank, and making sure that this collaboration that we kick off today can make sure that we achieve better outcomes for as many people as we can across the world as they struggle with the challenges ahead. So look forward to that, and also look forward in a moment to spending or sharing some of my thoughts on who we are and what we do, because I'm sure many of you are also wondering, well, who in the hell are you and what the hell do you do? So I'm happy to share that as well. But I might pause my opening remarks there and then happy to jump into talking a little bit about what we do. So thank you. Now we'll see if we can manage the technology here. I'm not sure whether we want to share the slides from your end or my end. What might be easier? I'm not sure.
You want to share?
The slides.
We can
Yep.
share. Yeah, we can
but,
share.
If
Okay.
you prefer some.
Or would you prefer to share from your end?
Look, I'll try. How about that? I'll try.
Okay, try it from your end, and then otherwise we share.
In fact, no, I shan't try because I'm on my iPad, and that's going to be incredibly difficult. So how about you do that, and then I'll talk.
Okay.
So, look, to start with, what I thought I'd do is give you a little bit of an overview of the history of the basin, how the basin plan came about, why it came about. As Matt mentioned, the Millennium Drought was a key driver of that, but also to give a sense of how the basin is managed and how the basin plan comes together. So, when the slides come up, I'll get started. I can't see them as yet.
They're coming.
Okay, good.
Yeah. PDF.
So
We got them in
let me-
PDF format, so we're trying to pull them up.
no problems. Let me see if I may be able to do it. So here we go. Thank you. Thanks, Erica. All right. So we just flick to the second slide, if I may. In fact, go to the third slide would be great. There we go. Great. Thank you. So a little bit about the basin. The basin exists in most of Southeast Australia. It's an area of more than 1 million square kilometres, so that's about 600,000 square miles. It covers an area larger than France and Germany. There are 23 major rivers, or what we would call major rivers in the system. Probably from where many of you are, they're more streams and brooks than rivers, but here in Australia we see them as that. There are about 7,500 irrigated agricultural businesses, and agricultural output from the basin is worth almost $25 billion a year. With that, a large predominance of that is exported to countries around the world. The basin exists over what we call the Great Australia, the Great Dividing Range, and so it's sort of west of the spine of Australia, if you like, and it's home to about 2.5 million Australians, with a number of reasonably sized towns and cities within that, towns like Canberra in particular. But most of it is agricultural land, pasture land, and the like. And very importantly, there are 16 internationally recognised and protected wetlands in the basin, so Ramsar sites, and they become very important in the context of how the Commonwealth of Australia exercises some level of control in relation to the basin. It's an incredibly rich and diverse region. There's more than 120 species of native birds, more than 50 species of native fish. Just yesterday afternoon, I was out with some Indigenous folk and we were doing some fish counting. And in a very, very small space, we saw an incredible diversity of native fish. We also have our fair share of introduced species as well, which is another challenge entirely. But there are more than 40 First Nations that count the basin as home, and they have had a continuous connection to the lands and waters of the basin for more than 60,000 years. So it's an incredibly complex system. To give you some sense of it, water in Australia, by virtue of our constitution, is a state function. And so every state has legislation and governance around how water is managed, but so too does the Commonwealth. And sitting on my desk in Canberra are about 986 pages of legislation which govern how we manage the basins. So it's a very, very complex engine of growth for Australia, and very, very important for tourism as well. About $11.5 billion worth of tourism. So it's an incredibly important part of Australia and incredibly important to our national identity, our national economy, and our national character. Thanks very much. We'll move to the next slide. So one of the things that's very important when we think about the basin is there's no such thing as average. Water is very, very scarce in the basin. And if you look at this chart, which reflects the inflows to the basin over the last 135 years, you'll see that there are more dips below the line than above the line. And that means that inflows below average. And when we go above the line, we tend to have very, very large episodic events. So you can see there, very large flood in 1956, another very large flood in 1974, and then actually a very large flood just recently in 2023. That makes it incredibly difficult to manage. And one of the other points that I'd highlight here, as the climate is changing, you can see that the predominance of sort of drier years, we've had more dry years in the last 30 than the preceding 100. And so from a management point of view, that makes it very, very challenging. And what we know as we look forward is that the basin will be hotter. In many parts, it will be drier. And in all parts, we'll have an incredibly variable inflow and wet and dry management cycle, if you like. And so one of the challenges for the basin plan, which is the plan that manages this scarce resource, is how do we deal with that variability? And so one of the things that we're very focused on at the MDBA is how do we introduce adaptive tools to allow us to deal with an uncertain climate future where the only thing we know is that it is going to be more variable. Can we move forward? Thank you. So this photo is, it is literally about 4 kilometres from where I sit right now this morning here in South Australia. Believe it or not, this is the mouth of the Murray, and this is when it closed in the mid-1980s. The River Murray is about 2,500 kilometres long. In fact, it's the 3rd largest navigable river in the world. And in the mid-1980s, as a result of over-extraction and overuse, the mouth of the Murray actually closed. And it was, if you like, an incredibly important wake-up call that something had to change. And that something was, how do we reduce extraction and ensure that we have enough water to see that we have a healthy working basin for everyone. I can happily say, having been at the mouth of the Murray yesterday afternoon, it's not closed right now, and we're seeing some pretty decent flows through there. But for a river that is so long and so important to Australia's national character, one of the comments I receive often when people go to the mouth of the Murray is that all it is? And so it's incredibly important that we manage the entire system from top to bottom as well as we possibly can. Thank you. So if we think back to how did we come to where we are, this really represents the progression, if you like, of water reform in the basin and water use. So the solid blue, if you like, is the volume of water that's being diverted for use. And the first River Murray Agreement was struck in 1914. For you buffs of history, some of you might know that Australia became a federation in 1901, where the states agreed to form the Commonwealth of Australia and become federated under that system. So we have a Commonwealth government, a national government, and then state governments. One of the key items of discussion during that period of forming federation and the drafting of the Constitution was water and how to share the waters of the River Murray. And so the first River Murray Agreement was struck just some 13 years after federation. And what was really interesting in terms of how that came about was that it took, if you like, so long for agreement to be reached on how the waters of the River Murray system should be shared, that when this sort of started in the 1890s through into the 1900s, a lot of the discussion was around navigation and the building of locks and weirs to support navigation and essentially paddle steamers to use the River Murray, if you like, as a roadway to transport goods to port. By the time they actually got agreement, rail had come in and overtaken paddle steamers as a form of transport. And so the River Murray Agreement became much more about how to share the waters of the Murray for agriculture and productivity than it was about navigation. And so what we saw through the period of growth after the Second World War, so Christopher mentioned the Australia being part of the World Bank. Well, as we moved out of being a borrower from the World Bank into that period of growth, we had very rapid growth through the 1950s, 60s and 70s, growth in agriculture, but of course also we started to see impacts on the health of the river system. And so problems with water quality, ecosystem health, the disconnection of floodplains from the river system, incredibly important that we see in an arid system like Australia that is very ephemeral. Those wetlands and floodplains need to be regularly connected to the river system, and we started to see the loss of that, and as a consequence, this loss of habitat to the point where the mouth of the Murray closed. That photo that I showed you just previously. So in 1995, governments realised that they had to do something different, and the first cap, if you like, a limit on diversions was put in place. And then from there, we started to see increasingly important policy initiatives to reduce extraction, diversion, and start to return some of that water to the environment. And so in 2003, the Living Murray program was really unique in the world in that it was a program that ensured the allocation of water to 6 what we call icon sites across the basin to ensure that they had water to protect and preserve these sites. 2004, under the leadership of the Commonwealth, who Matt works for, the first National Water Initiative, which was a coordinated effort, again, not only in relation to the basin, but more broadly as to how to share water across the country. In 2007, the Water Act was put into place, which then gave birth to the Basin Plan in 2012. And if you want to think simply about the Basin Plan, it is a plan to put a limit on extraction and diversions from the waters of the basin. That plan has continued to evolve. In 2019, what was put in place were what we call sustainable diversion limits. And a sustainable diversion limit, there are 109 SDL units, as we call them, across the basin. And each of those SDL units looks at the water resource in that area and then determines what is sustainable in terms of what can be used for agriculture, for communities, for extraction, and what needs to be preserved for the environment to ensure that we achieve what is called an environmentally sustainable level of take, and an incredibly important initiative to break the basin down into these SDL units to put these limits on take. And one of the things that underpins that also is we in Australia have tradable water markets. And so what happens there is when the government has acquired a significant portion of water in terms of the overall inflows in the basin, close to 3,000 gigalitres of water is now retained by the Commonwealth in order to be used for environmental purposes. And the existence of a market allows that to occur because that water has been acquired and is now used by a body called the Commonwealth Environment Water Holder to distribute that water for the environment. And then next year, we're required to review the Basin Plan. It will be the first review of the Basin Plan since it was put in place in 2012. And my organisation, the Authority, is responsible for doing that. And we will make recommendations to the government about how we see the next 10 years of basin management and what needs to change. And our focus will be very much on ensuring that we deliver the right outcomes to deal with that increasingly variable climate. Thanks very much. So who does what? It's an incredibly complex framework that we operate under because of our federation. Constitutionally, water is a state function, but we need that level of control by the Commonwealth. And so the Commonwealth is able to exercise some level of control over the states by virtue of its international commitments to protect those Ramsar listed wetlands. It is very much a partnership between the federal government, the state governments and communities, and the federal government has invested more than $13 billion to support the development of the Basin Plan. And what we have is legislation at the Commonwealth level and then legislation at the state level, which allows the Basin Plan to be given effect and to be implemented. And so very simplistically, and we sort of walk up the pyramid, if you like. So the states, they are responsible for the delivery of water to your consumptive users, so your irrigators, your towns, communities, and the like. And the states, through the Basin Plan, are required to comply with limits on consumption, those sustainable diversion limits that I mentioned, and they have their own legislative frameworks at the state level. Water markets are run at the state level. The commitments under the Basin Plan are delivered by the states, large part funded by the Commonwealth. The MDBA, my organisation, we're very responsible for the science that underpinned the development of the Basin Plan in the first place. So Scott's team is really responsible for that. And as we look forward, understanding how climate change will impact on the basin and how can we develop an adaptive set of tools to ensure that we're able to manage for a much more uncertain future. The MDBA is also responsible for establishing basin-wide environmental watering strategies, and they then flow into annual environmental watering plans. And we also do all of the monitoring. So the states report to us on how they are going in meeting those sustainable diversion limits. And so many ways I describe to people, we're a bit like the water accountant, if you like, and then we provide that data to the Inspector General of Water Compliance, the IGWC, who in turn make sure that the states are complying with their legislative obligations. The MDBA, essentially, if you think about us in two parts, we run the River Murray system, which is an irrigation system, and we deliver the Basin Plan. And then the Commonwealth government, the federal government, they are responsible for the overall national water policy environment, the Commonwealth Environment Water Holder, and the implementation of the Federal Water Act. And we have a very, very close working relationship with Matt and his team in terms of how all of those pieces of the puzzle come together. And the Commonwealth is responsible for chairing and coordinating the Ministerial Council, which oversees the entire framework, and also the senior bureaucrats, the Basin Officials Committee, which runs, if you like, the policy environment for water in Australia or in the basin. Thank you very much. So if we move forward one more slide. So what's the system look like? This is not a map of the London Tube. It does look a little bit like that, but essentially this is a simplistic design of the River Murray system. And this is sort of tries to outline how water is shared. The River Murray represents the border between the states of New South Wales and Victoria, and that therefore brings a number of challenges in terms of how do we manage a scarce resource. And so what we have is a number of large storages, Dartmouth Dam and Hume Dam, and so inflows that come into those very large storages on the right of your screen at the top end there, and out of the Snowy Hydro system, they are shared 50-50 between the states of Victoria and New South Wales. And as those storages fill, and the MDBA manages how those storages are run to be filled in order to ensure water moves down the system. As we start to move down the system, as tributaries flow in from New South Wales and from Victoria, those sit 100% with each of the states. And then just to complicate things, our next largest river, the Darling River, which starts in the system that starts in Queensland and flows down into the River Murray system, those inflows are shared between the states under certain conditions when water reaches a place called Menindee Lakes. And Menindee Lakes is in Western New South Wales, in a very, very arid part of the state, and yet we have a storage of some 1,400 gigalitres there, which helps top up, if you like, the system as it flows down into South Australia. And South Australia at the bottom of the system, no real inflows for South Australia, and so their entitlement to water is supplied equally by New South Wales and Victoria. And there's a very complex set of rules that govern how we manage the River Murray system. And so the MDBA is responsible for the coordination of that, and then the execution on a day-to-day basis occurs through each of the states. So we are funded by the states and the Commonwealth in order to run the River Murray system, and then we in turn work with the states to execute the rules and operational requirements of the River Murray system. And in effect, what we are aiming to do is to ensure that South Australia, where I am today, is able to receive its entitlements, that we protect and preserve the ecological health of the system right down to the mouth of the River Murray, down here at Lake Alexandrina, and ensuring that through the year the system is charged or full enough to meet the extractive demands of users along the River Murray system. And we have a very complex set of rules and operating procedures that allow us to do that. So it's a complex beast. Outside of the River Murray system, so other rivers within Victoria, river systems in Queensland and New South Wales, they are run by the respective states, but do form part of the basin plan in terms of the overall limits on extraction. But here with the River Murray, we have a much more active role in managing that system of storages and flows to meet the needs of the communities and the irrigation industries that depend on the River Murray system. We move to the next slide. So the basin plan is the other side of our business, so running the River Murray system and then the basin plan. And the basin plan, as Matt mentioned, a series of water reforms that are basically aimed to ensure that we have enough water for the environment. And so the basin plan is a framework that allowed the recovery of water from users that were using that for extractive purposes and returning that water to the environment to make sure that we continue to improve the health of the rivers and ecosystems of the basin. And I think fair to say after 12 years of operation, we've seen a significant improvement in most of the key indicators that point to the health of the basin system. And we are required to report on progress as we go through implementation. The basin plan also sets out how water resources are managed from a compliance point of view. So the role of the states, the Commonwealth, the Inspector General who oversees compliance. It provides a framework for the trading of water, which is really important to allow us to recover and use water productively whilst also protecting the environment. The monitoring and accounting role that I mentioned, which is very much the role of the MDBA, and also our work in setting those sustainable diversion limits, which says this is how much water can be taken out while still preserving and protecting the outcomes for the environment. And then water resource plans are the obligation, the framework that the states set out how they are going to manage catchments across the basin at a local level. And each of those water resource plans describes how the state is going to manage its arrangements in order to ensure they meet the sustainable diversion limits put on overall extraction. We move forward, thank you. So we've been at this for 13 years. And I think the overall intent of the basin plan has been progressing well. It was very much about rebalancing in water use and returning or restoring outcomes for the environment. And I think to a large degree that has been achieved. There is a lot that we've learnt. And actually what's been really challenging and interesting is that over the last 13 years, we've had very, very challenging conditions. We've had some massive floods, extended periods of drought, very sharp droughts, and also some significant fire events, which have really impacted on water quality as well. And over that 13 years, we've also got much, much better at how we work with communities and how we're able to work collectively to achieve better outcomes for the basin. And I think that's one of the great unfinished pieces of work, how we work more effectively with communities and First Nations in managing the basin, but we are making significant progress. And I think it's probably fair to say that through the implementation of the basin plan, we have arrested the decline in the health of the basin. We haven't necessarily taken us forward to where we actually need to be to ensure the long-term sustainable health of the basin, but we have halted what was a very, very rapid decline in the ecosystem health of the basin. And that in and of itself is a very, very significant achievement. And move forward one slide, thank you. And so some of the things that are really important, about 20% of the water that's available in the basin is now set aside for the environment and managed through the efforts of the Commonwealth Environment Water Holder and making sure that we get the right water to the right places in the right volumes at the right times. And we've learned an enormous amount out of how we use environmental water. And the evidence is very, very clear that where we can get water onto the floodplain, where we can make those connections, where we can enhance that connectivity and flows, we see significant improvements in environmental outcomes. And that is probably self-evident, but it's been important to understand how to use environmental water to best effect. One of the other really important things that the Basin Plan has driven is improvement in the efficiency with which we use water. The Commonwealth Government has invested more than $5.1 billion in working to improve the efficiency of water use on farm. And we've seen significant investments by farmers backed with Commonwealth funding to improve efficiency on their farms, and also significant improvements from the large irrigation infrastructure operators, so large irrigation providers that manage networks of irrigation, significant improvements in the efficiency with which they use water. As an example, cotton in Australia is a very important industry, very heavily dependent on irrigation in the basin. The average water use of the cotton industry in Australia is 55% below global average water use for the growth of cotton. So an incredibly efficient industry. And we've also seen significant improvements and changes in land use. So Australia was a very large producer of rice, not so much anymore. Southern part of the basin, we used to see a lot of irrigated broadacre crops like wheat, for example, much less so now. So we've also seen the Basin Plan drive changes in land use patterns, as well as improving the efficiency with which we use water. And of course, those continued efforts to ensure that the needs and objectives and goals of First Nations people, who were largely excluded from water management over the last 100 or so years, are now increasingly engaged and involved in helping to manage the resources of the basin. And very, very important that continues, because First Nations people have more than 60,000 years of experience on country in managing resources like water efficiently and effectively. So how do we capture and use that knowledge is what's important. But it would be false of me to suggest that it's all been easy and has not been without pain. And if we move to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that have been challenging. And it's been very challenging and a challenging adjustment.
Step in for a minute.
Yeah.
If I could just step in for a minute, I'm just a little conscious of the time.
Sure.
I'm reading the room and I think everyone is quite engaged in your presentation.
Yep.
So I just want to do a check that we're all okay to run over and stay a little bit later. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Great. Okay, thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No problems. Thanks for the reminder. And look, I've only got about 2 minutes to go. So, and look, the impact of the Basin Plan has been very significant. As you take productive resource out of the economy, it impacts on communities, and particularly small irrigation-dependent communities have been significantly impacted by the Basin Plan, and that's been a real challenge. And the federal government has been very active in providing adjustment support for those communities. And what we're also seeing is that in part water prices have been higher because of the Basin Plan, so that's increased costs for irrigators in particular. We've seen agricultural output is probably about 2% lower by virtue of the Basin Plan as people have shifted out of agriculture without access to water, and we're seeing water prices higher. So the Basin Plan has prompted significant adjustment in communities, and I think it's important that we recognise that. If we just move forward, I think I'm just about done actually. And it's been challenging, as I say, for agriculture, the inclusion of First Nations people. The outcomes for native fish have not been as good as we would have hoped, largely because we still have many, many barriers to fish movement in the basin. And interestingly, and I'll finish on this point, where we've had very prescriptive programs, they've not worked as well. Where under the Basin Plan we've focused on the establishment of outcomes and not been as prescriptive in how those outcomes are achieved, we get better results. And so that's something that we've learnt as we look to go forward. And as we look to the future of the Basin Plan, we are looking to focus far more deeply on outcomes instead of process. And I think that's something that we've learnt significantly over the 13 years of implementation. So it's been quite a journey. It's been a significant challenge. It's been a massive investment by the Commonwealth Government and by the states in delivering the Basin Plan. And I do hope that as we look to review the plan over the next 18 months, that we can take those learnings and set ourselves up for the next decade of water management in the basin here in Australia. So look, I'll stop there, and very, very happy to, I'm not sure you want to take questions or how you want to do it, but I'm more than happy to engage in any conversation about anything you might have heard there this morning.
You have to clap again.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm not sure you can see us all in the room, but
Yes,
there was
I
a
can.
lot of interest and we were carefully following it. We weren't planning to do a Q&A session afterwards, but I would like to ask if we could indulge you in a question as we transition to the next presentation. But Jürgen, would you?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm mindful of time, so I have a ton of questions. But looking back 30 years, this was your journey from 95 to where you are today. What would you do differently if you, now in hindsight, did you have to do everything? Is the political economy what, is it necessary to do these things? Because if it takes you 30 years, I'm just thinking how long it will take most of our clients, which have, a fraction of your capacity.
Yeah. Gee, that's a big question. I mean, in many ways, the challenges have been the federation of working with the states and the Commonwealth, and I think it's incredibly challenging to get that alignment. I think if we could have, I mean, ideally, the better outcome would have been states to cede their powers to the Commonwealth to coordinate the management of water. To be really honest, that would have made it far easier, probably less expensive as well for the Commonwealth. I mean, the Commonwealth doesn't have many levers over the states other than financial. And so that's how we've incentivised states to participate. So I think that's been probably the single biggest challenge, is getting that coordination of effort and alignment across the states and the Commonwealth. So I'm not sure that we could have done it differently, because states don't like ceding their powers to the Commonwealth. But in a perfect world, perhaps that's where we would have gone. I think we were very close at the time, but for various reasons, it didn't happen. But I think the other thing is, never waste a good crisis. That
was necessary.
I mean, something had to change, and thankfully it did. And that took extraordinary political leadership, particularly from Prime Minister John Howard at the time, in order to get the Water Act implemented and get the states aligned behind the Basin Plan. So it's in a non-federated system, you might find that it's easier, but don't underestimate the complexity, and it costs a lot of money as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm sure others have many more questions for you, but I think it's just a reflection of how rich this partnership is going to be. So we're really looking forward to working with you. I'm now going to turn it over to Christina Love, who's our lead for Transboundary Waters at the World Bank.
I'm going to take control of the computer here. Because thank you, Andrew. I think you really highlighted why the partnership is so important. The Murray-Darling Basin Authority and you and your colleagues, as Jürgen already mentioned at the outset, really have a very rich experience to share with all our client countries. And since it is already almost 7, I'm going to be very quick and run through my slides very quickly. But just so that to give you an idea what you're getting yourself into in the partnership with our team, the breadth of work that we are doing and how we are supporting countries. As you mentioned, rivers are the arteries of our planet. They support economic growth, prosperity, but we're not managing them in a way that is sustainable. We're polluting them. Water resources are getting scarce, and this has huge economic costs, and it also has impact on prosperity, employment. In addition to the many federal rivers, just like the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, we have more than 313 internationally shared rivers and 468 identified transboundary aquifers, which cover a large part of the Earth's surface and sustain over half of the world's population. And as you mentioned, that governance really is the key. Of the internationally transboundary shared basins, only more than 2/3 don't have comprehensive frameworks. And with the transboundary aquifers, and Francois, who is sitting here, will correct me, we have 7 to 8 transboundary aquifers that have cross-jurisdictional governance frameworks. And this is where the experience of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority is so important, because federal rivers governance has a lot of lessons for transboundary water governance. The principles of transboundary water governance are actually derived from jurisdiction, from federal systems, just like the equitable and reasonable use principle. At the World Bank, just a quick snapshot, we currently have 257 operations worth about 50 billion that are taking place in transboundary waters. And through our policy framework, we're promoting transparency, but also very clearly are ready to assist riparian countries where they seek coordinated basin development, because we know that coordinated basin development brings greater benefits than unilateral development. In terms of our instruments, we have our standard financing instruments, credits, concessional finances, grants, credit loans. We have dedicated windows that incentivize projects with cross-border externalities, such as nature-based or gray storage that is located in one country, contributes to drought and flood mitigation in other countries. And we have dedicated partnerships. We have currently 2 regional transboundary partnerships, 1 basin level, and then we have the Global Facility for Transboundary Water Cooperation that is financed through the GWSP, the Global Water Security and Sanitation Partnership. And as you can see, we have a lot of development partners funding these partnerships, providing us with the opportunity to help the client countries. But we also have a lot of other partners where we have co-financing and knowledge partnerships, including other IFIs, international organizations, other countries, academia, and civil society. So currently our regional programs focus on the regions that have the biggest needs. Central Asia Water Energy Program covers the region where the breakup of the Soviet Union turned rivers into transboundary rivers, and works on the energy water nexus because the infrastructure systems require concerted and nexus management. SIWA, the Cooperation in International Waters in Africa, covers the continent with which is most exposed to transboundary waters. 90% of freshwater flow in 63 transboundary basins. The Danube Water Program was established on the background of prior 20 years of work on water quality improvement in the Danube in collaboration with the JEF. And we have the Global Facility for Transboundary Water Cooperation to also assist in those regions which currently don't have tailored programs, and to make sure that we promote global knowledge sharing across all regions, and to make sure that knowledge really travels, hence this partnership. Just some examples. So we work on transboundary rivers through national projects. Here's one of the biggest examples is the Ganga River Basin. It's a series of national projects in India that rejuvenated the Ganga through increasing the coverage of wastewater treatment, crowding in private sector. The Ganga, of course, is a transboundary river shared by 4 countries, but also runs through 11 states in India. The Savadrina Rivers Corridor, again, is in a region where the breakup of a country led to the creation of a transboundary basin, and is part of a much bigger Danube Basin, which has 19 riparian countries. And here we're working with the countries on flood protection, navigation, transport for tourism. And then we have a lot of investments that are both national and regionally coordinated. And I wanted to highlight the Horn of Africa Groundwater Resilience Project, because that's really sort of one of the projects where we work a lot with the local communities, using the indigenous knowledge that you were talking about, Matt and Andrew, to help communities manage their very scarce water resources, and using sort of making sure that the aquifers really provide the storage that they need for resilience. So the focus, again, as I said, is sort of really delivering economic growth, employment, and resilience. We have many, many more examples in many more sectors. And maybe just one last message that I wanted to mention, to really ensure that these sectoral investments are sustainable and are long-lived. The investment in the institutions and working with the regional institutions and the National River Basin Authority is key, because they are the driver of cooperation, the driver of development, and they are the ones that manage the resource. So thank you, Andrew, for this collaboration. I'll stop here. And thank you, everybody, for this.
Yeah, thank you, Christina, for a very quick presentation, but also a very good taste of some of the bank's work and their long history working in transboundary waters. We're now going to turn it over to some closing remarks, but I just want to assure everyone that this is the beginning of a conversation. So we've seen lots of interest, and so we'll have lots of opportunities to continue. I'm going to turn it over to Arup Anjari, who's our Director for Knowledge and Learning at the World Bank. Arup, over to you.
Thank you so much, Eileen, and thank you and congratulations to all my friends in the Planet Vertical Water Practice, but also to the Government of Australia and the Murray-Darling Basin Authority for launching this partnership. I can't resist, since all of you have shared, that for me too, this is an issue very close to my heart. I grew up in Bengal in India, the largest delta in the world, the Ganga-Brahmaputra Delta, very much a transboundary issue, and one that is in different ways, again, challenged by some of the very issues that I think countries across the world face. So the partnership and its focus on knowledge is something that I think is going to be critical in addressing these issues, as all of you have said. Now, for the World Bank, Christina showed the $50 billion in portfolio that we have in these issues, but when countries come to the World Bank for partnership and help in solving the wicked development challenges, as they call it, they don't come just for the money. They come for the knowledge, not the knowledge about the why or the theory, but very much the how-to. So just in case of, Andrew, your presentation, the text of the Basin Plan, anyone can, in today's world, Google it or get that from ChatGPT. But the real challenges that our client countries want to learn is exactly what you described, and Jürgen's question on how do you manage the complex institutional and jurisdictional relationships? How do you set up a system of monitoring? How do you do the evaluation and course correction? How do you reach out to local levels? This is the type of knowledge that really this partnership embodies, right? And in the new Knowledge Bank, we are actually doubling down on this idea that what is the World Bank's role in helping countries address development challenges goes beyond finance, but is to bring this experiential knowledge from across the world, from partners such as yourself, to the world, to the people and the countries and the authorities who need it. So part of this is, of course, going to be in this partnership, taking your successful solutions, your experience, understanding it, collating it, and transmitting it to our client countries. Many of us are present in this webinar. But what, Jürgen, your opening remarks also reminded us is that the world we live in is not one where existing solutions are going to be enough. We're facing new challenges. You in Australia and the authority will face new challenges that we can't fully understand right now. And we will need to co-create new solutions as well. And that is also, I hope, part of the partnership. So in a way, we did more together than just to launch a partnership that had that MOU, the picture of the MOU in one of the early slides. We're joining hands with each other, right? And eventually with many countries across the world for a three-way conversation, a conversation between the World Bank, the authority, and our client countries, so that the Murray-Darling lived experience interact and inform our client countries' realities. And again, not in theory, not in academic papers, but in everyday practice of the how-to. So in conclusion, really, for the World Bank teams under the leadership of Jürgen and Saroj, but also my own teams across the World Bank group working on knowledge and learning, we want to work really closely together to you in this sort of dynamic relationship, sharing information and curating the knowledge, but also to adapt them to the specific challenges faced by very different countries from Australia. And in turn, we hope that this partnership will create new knowledge that can flow to countries across the world, including perhaps back to the Murray-Darling Authority itself in new and different ways. So, water usually, though not always, flows in one direction. The wonderful thing about knowledge is that it's best when it flows in both directions and mixes and enriches itself in the process. So thank you. Thank you to our partners in Australia, the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, and of course, my colleagues in the Plant Vertical and the Water Global Department for embarking in this exciting journey, but an important journey together. And certainly on my part and our part, we look forward to accompanying you in this journey and to really come to our shared goal is using this knowledge to create real impact and real solutions across the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Arup. We're now going to turn it over to Suresh Kumar Jha, who's the Global Director of Water at the World Bank.
Thank you, Sarah. I think I want to begin by, first of all, thanking everyone for being here. Matt in Australia, Andrew, Arup, Chris has left, but also everybody on the legal side. I see Vikram here. I saw Victor here because before I reach out to our Australian friends, our internal partnership is as important because it takes not just the water family, but all of us to really work together in planet, in legal, in finance. And I think we are trying to, and Arup, your presence is also important because we want to really institutionalize these partnerships because we've been at it for a very, very long time. World Bank has been in Transboundary for a long time, but I think what we want to do is to professionalize, institutionalize, and specialize in this field as the institution that can support the countries to the challenges that both Jürgen and Matt talked about in the opening. So I really want to thank everybody for being here. For me, this partnership is also very special, as Matt knows that I was a volunteer in Sydney Olympics many, many years back. I have played cricket for India in the under-19 team in Australia, in at least 2 cricket grounds. So Australia is very, very special for me, as many colleagues in Canberra know. But the reason we came to you is not because we had an idea to sign an MOU and a partnership, because as Jürgen knows, I have spent most of my time at the World Bank living in very difficult transboundary water situations in the last 20 years. And I have faced it firsthand as the World Bank director in the field as to why these issues are so central, not just for the peace and stability, but also for economic development agenda. And I have always carried it in my heart and brain all the time that why can't we really establish mechanisms through knowledge, partnerships, financing, institutions, so that the world is a better place, especially when it is about sharing water resources. And this is why when I first time visited Australia in my new capacity, this is something which I talked to many people. And that's how we connected with Andrew and the team. And I thought the question that we are confronted with, people in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in Senegal River Basin, World Bank doesn't have really answer to many of the questions. And as Arup was saying, each situation is very different. But the conversation, the exchange, peer-to-peer learning one basin with the other can have a huge impact. And I think that's where MDBA experience to me, I mean, we got a glimpse of this in the last 20 minutes, but I think there are books written on MDBA, those of you who are interested. And I think it is a source of inspiration for many basins, what to do, what not to do, what to continue to work on this. What I was fascinated by this is that unless you really work with the basin communities, no matter how sophisticated your reforms are, you will not succeed. And those of you who have followed my work in India, I was the first watershed mission director for India in 1995. When India really wanted to take a very new approach to managing water, land, etc. And the realization was, unless you get down to micro watershed and work with the communities, you will never succeed, no matter how much money you put. And that's exactly the point, Andrew, you made, that the success of this will depend on those water resource plans that you do with the basin communities, the First Nations communities, etc. So I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of what we have seen. And we want to learn from this. In closing, I want to say that the work begins now, as far as this partnership is concerned. And I'm very happy that with Jorgen's support, we have Christina Leb on board as lead on this agenda. We are very serious about it, as Andrew, you know. Before coming to this meeting, Christina already contacted all our 7 regional vice presidencies to see where there is already a need for this kind of knowledge exchange and capacity building in various basins in 7 regions of the World Bank Group. So I think we'll convert this conversation into some kind of a work program. And we are able to take this forward. I don't want to take too much time, but I do want to say that in addition to this partnership, the World Bank in the last 12 months established a very strong partnership with the government of Singapore, also on knowledge exchange, primarily focused on urban water management and coastal flooding. And in the next 2 weeks, in about 2 weeks' time, the World Bank Group is launching a West Africa Water Center and a World Bank Group Academy Impact Program on defying drought, focused on drought mitigation. That is under Arup's unit. So you can see the focus on World Bank bringing experiential learning and knowledge to our clients, in addition to our financing. So we want to really become good at it. We want to really strengthen this role that we have as a knowledge bank. And I think this particular partnership is very much part of that thinking we have as an institution. So again, a big thank you, Andrew, and your entire team who are online. I can't see them on the screen, but I know Christina on our side and everybody who has really worked very hard to make this happen. And thank you very much to all my colleagues who are here in the room. It's pretty late in DC. And so I really want to thank you all for being here and spending so much time. And again, big thank you, Jorgen, for your support, and Matt, for your support. And please give my thanks also to our DFAT colleagues, if they are, I don't see them, but they have been a big support as well, Matt. So please convey my thanks to Rob, Christie, and everybody else in DFAT. They have been a big support. Thank you. And thanks, everyone.